My name is Emily. I'm 31, a single mom, and I just lost the job I thought would carry us through the next decade. One email, one meeting, one cardboard box in my hands, and suddenly I was another statistic. If it weren't for my savings, the stash I'd built over years of sacrifice, I don't know how I'd be breathing right now. Every dollar in that account came from something I gave up: nights skipping dinner out, secondhand clothes, hours of overtime when I could barely keep my eyes open. It wasn't much by some people's standards, but to me it was the wall between my daughter and disaster. She's 7, all wide eyes and endless questions, still young enough to think I can fix anything. She doesn't know how many nights I've sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like landmines, trying to stretch a single paycheck until it snapped. She doesn't know about the quiet panic that hums in my chest when I think too far ahead. I never wanted her to. That's why the stash mattered. It was proof that no matter what happened, I could keep her safe. Growing up, no one kept me safe. I learned early that in my family, I was the one expected to hold things together. If money was short, I picked up shifts. If someone stumbled, I was the cushion they landed on. My stepbrother especially, he always managed to charm his way out of responsibility while I was left cleaning up the mess. I used to tell myself that role made me strong. But the truth is, it just made me tired. Now, after the layoff, I clung to the idea that this time would be different. I wasn't bailing anyone else out. The stash was for me and my little girl, no one else. For once in my life, I thought I had something untouchable. And then, he showed up. My stepbrother. I hadn't seen him in months, but there he was on my doorstep, smiling like a man reborn. He hugged me, asked about my daughter, told me I'd always been the one he admired. The words were so foreign in his mouth I almost laughed. Instead, I let him in. Because I was raw, and tired, and maybe part of me wanted to believe he had finally changed. But deep down, something in me knew better. His eyes were too bright, his questions too careful, his warmth too sudden. He wasn't there for me. And I was about to hand him the one thing I swore no one would ever take from me. He sat at my kitchen table like he owned it, his chair tipped back on 2 legs, hands folded across his chest in that smug, lazy way I remembered too well. My stepbrother, Jason. 3 years older than me but somehow still a boy, still chasing shortcuts and miracles while the rest of us scraped through reality. Growing up, Jason made me feel like a shadow. He had a gift for charm. Not the kind that won trophies or scholarships, but the kind that talked his way out of late homework, borrowed money he never paid back, and convinced people he was just one lucky break away from greatness. Meanwhile, I was the one covering shifts, doing the invisible work. I told myself I'd outgrown the sting of his smirks and the sharp edge of his comments. But the moment he leaned back in my chair, smiling like we were suddenly on the same team, I felt 12 again, unsteady, waiting for the punchline. I've been thinking about you, he said, like it was some grand declaration. About your situation. My situation. He made it sound like a headline. Laid off single mom barely keeping it together. I stayed quiet, arms crossed, waiting. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as though he were about to share a secret treasure. I've got this idea. A family business. Something solid. Something we can build together. You and me, Em. Those words, you and me, landed heavy. Jason had never, not once in his life, included me in anything unless there was something in it for him. I asked the obvious question, what kind of business? He grinned. Distribution. Health products, supplements, that kind of thing. People are eating this stuff up, especially online. It's practically recession-proof. Low overhead, big return. We'd start small, scale fast. I've already got contacts lined up. It sounded rehearsed, like a pitch he'd practiced in the mirror. Every sentence was polished just enough to sound promising but vague enough to avoid details. I should have asked for numbers. Paperwork. Proof. I should have laughed him out of my kitchen. But the truth is, I was desperate. My job search was already stalling, interviews few and far between. My daughter's needs didn't pause for bad luck. Rent was still due. Groceries still cost more every week. And though the stash was keeping us afloat, I could feel it shrinking, month by month, like sand slipping through an hourglass. Jason saw it. He always saw weakness and knew how to press on it. "You've always been the smart one," he said. "I mean, look at you, you managed to put something away while the rest of us barely stayed afloat. That's discipline, Em. You've got what it takes. But savings alone? That won't last. Not these days. You need to put it to work." His words sank hooks into me because they echoed the fears already gnawing at my gut. I'd run the math in my head 100 times. If I dipped into the stash carefully, maybe we'd last a year. Maybe less. And then what? Jason reached across the table, his hand brushing mine, his eyes locked on me with a rare intensity. "We could turn your savings into double. Triple. Secure your future, and hers." He jerked his chin toward the hallway, where my daughter's laughter drifted from her bedroom. "Don't you want her to have more than scraps? Don't you want her to know you built something real?" The mention of her cut through me. It was cruel, using her like that, but it worked. Everything I did was for her. And the way he said it, it lit up that part of me that was so tired of surviving, so hungry for a chance to actually get ahead. I asked him what he needed. My voice was small when I said it, almost like I was afraid to hear the answer. He smiled like a cat with cream. "A partner. A little seed money to get it rolling. I'll do the legwork, handle the contacts, set up the platform. You won't have to worry about a thing. Just sit back and watch it grow." "How much?" I asked. He shrugged, casual, like the number wasn't outrageous. 50. To start. 50. As in 50,000. Almost the whole stash. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Are you out of your mind?" But he didn't flinch. He leaned back again, all calm confidence. "You've got it, don't you? Sitting in some account, doing nothing while inflation eats it alive. Don't tell me you've been killing yourself for years just to watch it wither away." I wanted to scream at him, to throw him out, to remind him of every time he'd burned me before. But instead, I heard myself asking, "And you swear this is safe?" "Safe as houses," he said without missing a beat. "I'd never let you down, Em. Not this time." It was the "not this time" that lodged in my throat. Because every other time, he had. But desperation is louder than memory. And hope for a better life, a secure future, maybe even a chance to finally be more than just the girl holding things together, hope is louder than instinct. So when Jason slid his phone across the table with the transfer details pulled up, I hesitated only a second before typing in the numbers. My chest burned, my stomach twisted, my hands shook as I hit send. Watching the screen confirm the transfer felt like jumping off a cliff. He grinned, tucking his phone into his pocket. "You won't regret this. I promise." But as the words left his mouth, I felt the first shiver of doubt crawl down my spine. At first, I clung to the belief that I'd done the right thing. I told myself the transfer wasn't recklessness, it was faith. Faith that my stepbrother would finally follow through, faith that maybe this time my family wouldn't leave me holding the bag. I forced myself to breathe when the confirmation text buzzed my phone, whispering, "It's an investment, not a loss." Jason fed that illusion well in the beginning. He called me the next day, his voice bubbling with energy. "It's moving fast, Em. I've got meetings lined up already. People are excited. We're gonna do this right." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. For a week or two, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. I pictured my daughter in a bedroom with actual space to play, vacations that didn't involve counting pennies, maybe even me finally sleeping through the night without my heart pounding over bills. But the cracks came quickly. When I asked for paperwork, contracts, projections, anything, he brushed it off. "It's all digital now, sis. Don't worry about the boring stuff. I've got it handled." When I pressed for details, what supplements, what distribution channels, who the contacts were, he dodged with slick phrases. It's better you don't get bogged down in logistics. That's my lane. Calls that used to come daily slipped to every few days, then once a week. His tone changed, too. The excitement was still there, but it sounded thinner, stretched, like someone replaying the same track over and over. My gut started screaming. One night, after my daughter had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the account balance on my phone. The numbers didn't lie, the stash was nearly gone. In its place, all I had were Jason's words, and those weren't adding up to much. I tried calling him, but the line rang out. I tried again the next day, and again, until finally his voicemail picked up on the first ring. His mailbox was full. That was when panic clawed its way into my chest. I drove by his apartment. The door was cracked open, the blinds drawn crooked. Inside, it looked like half the place had been stripped. Boxes stacked in the hallway, empty spaces where furniture used to be. His landlord, a tired-looking man in a stained shirt, shrugged when I asked. Hasn't paid rent in months. Cleared out fast. Left no forwarding address. I stood in that hallway, staring at the ghost of his life, and felt my knees threaten to give out. It hit me in waves. The stash wasn't just gone, it had never even been safe in his hands. He hadn't built anything. There was no business, no investors, no future. Just lies. I went to the police, clutching the only proof I had, screenshots of transfers, a few vague texts. The officer behind the desk didn't even blink before giving me the script. It's a civil matter, ma'am. Not criminal unless you can prove fraud. You'll need to get a lawyer. Maybe file in small claims court. Civil matter. As though $50,000 of my blood and sweat were the same as a neighbor not mowing his lawn. I left the station hollow, the fluorescent lights buzzing in my skull. At home, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to swallow the reality. I had been played. Again. By the same person who'd been taking from me my entire life, only this time he had gutted the one thing that kept me standing. I thought of my daughter asleep down the hall, her small body curled beneath the blanket, trusting me to keep her safe. I thought of how I'd whispered to her that everything would be okay, how I'd promised stability when deep down I knew I'd gambled away our lifeline. Shame burned hotter than grief. I had prided myself on being careful, on protecting her from the chaos I grew up in. And now I was staring down a future where the fridge might go empty, the rent might fall behind, and the ground beneath us might crack wide open. I told myself I'd figure it out. I always did. But that night, lying awake in the dark, I couldn't shake the image of Jason's face as he pocketed his phone after the transfer. That smug smile. That practiced confidence. He'd known exactly what he was doing. And I'd walked right into it. I thought the worst part was losing the money. I didn't know yet that the real truth, what he had actually done with it, was darker than I could imagine. For weeks after Jason disappeared, I walked around like a ghost. I went through the motions, packing lunches, walking my daughter to school, applying for jobs I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. Outwardly, I was functioning. Inside, I was crumbling. The stash was gone. That reality sat in my chest like a boulder, pressing on me every time I opened my eyes in the morning. I'd replay the transfer in my head, the way my finger hovered before pressing send. The way his smile widened when the confirmation pinged. The way I told myself it was hope when it was really desperation. I was humiliated, but worse, I was furious. At him, at myself, at the universe for handing me this script again and again, me giving, him taking. I tried not to think about him. But then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a small, hesitant voice came through. And it was his son. Ethan was 9. Quiet, shy, the kind of boy who shrank into corners when the room got too loud. I had always felt protective of him, maybe because I recognized something of myself in him, always overlooked, always adapting to survive someone else's chaos. "Hi, sweetheart," I said carefully. "Are you okay?" There was a pause, then a soft sniffle. "Can I come over?" Half an hour later, he was at my door, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes red like he'd been crying for hours. My daughter pulled him inside, chattering about the new game she wanted to show him, but he barely smiled. He sat at the table, shoulders hunched, staring at his hands. "Did something happen at home?" I asked gently once the kids were alone in the living room. He shrugged. "Dad's gone a lot. And when he's home, he's mad. All the time." The words were like knives. I knew that anger, that volatility. I'd seen Jason throw tantrums as a teenager, holes in walls, smashed dishes. But hearing it from his son, hearing how it echoed through another generation, made my stomach twist. That night, after dinner, I helped him with homework. He struggled through math problems, erasing until the page tore. When I tried to soothe him, he exploded, slamming his pencil down, tears spilling fast. "It's too hard. I can't do it." I pulled the notebook away gently. "It's okay, Ethan. We can take a break." He buried his face in his arms, shoulders shaking. Then, in a voice so small I almost missed it, he whispered, "Dad says I'm not supposed to tell." My pulse quickened. "Tell what?" He lifted his head, eyes wet and shining. "About the money game. With the chips. And the cards. He says it's our secret." The room spun. My breath caught like I'd been punched. "Chips and cards?" I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice calm even as dread crawled up my spine. Ethan nodded. "He takes money and plays. Sometimes he wins, but mostly he loses. He says it's gonna fix everything. But it doesn't. It just makes him mad." I sat frozen, every piece of the puzzle snapping into place with brutal clarity. There was never a business. Never investors. Never a future. My brother hadn't just stolen my stash, he'd gambled it away. I wanted to scream. To break something. To drive to wherever he was and drag him back by his collar. But sitting there, looking at Ethan's tear-streaked face, I knew none of that would change the truth. The money was gone. And this boy, this innocent, sweet boy, was living in the wreckage of Jason's lies. I pulled him close, his small body trembling against me. "It's not your fault," I whispered fiercely. "None of this is your fault." He clung to me like he was drowning, sobs shaking his frame. My daughter hovered in the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the weight. In that moment, with both of them looking at me, one crying, one silently pleading, I felt something inside me crack. The grief, the shame, the panic of losing everything, it shifted. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about children caught in the storm of a man's addiction. And for the first time in weeks, my own despair took a back seat to something stronger, resolve. I didn't know how I would do it yet. But I knew one thing for certain, Jason might have burned through my savings, but I would not let him burn through his son. I wiped Ethan's tears, promising him he was safe with me. But deep down, a fire was already catching. Jason thought he'd taken everything from me. He had no idea, I was just getting started. Grief is a strange animal. It doesn't just sit on your chest, it crawls, it gnaws, it whispers when the house goes quiet. After Ethan's confession, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd pace the kitchen at night with a glass of water I never drank, my reflection in the window hollow-eyed and tense. Jason had taken my savings, but worse than that, he'd taken the story I told myself about who I was. Careful. Responsible. The strong one who could be counted on. Now, looking at my dwindling account, I felt like a fool who had handed over everything without a fight. I replayed Ethan's words again and again. The money game. Chips and cards. His tiny voice describing my nightmare. I imagined Jason sitting in some smoky backroom, chips stacked high, slamming my hard-earned dollars down on the table like they were disposable tokens. My sacrifices, the years of scrimping, the nights of exhaustion, had turned into playthings for his addiction. The shame was unbearable. For days, I went through life in a fog. I still got my daughter ready for school, still smiled when she showed me her drawings, still asked Ethan about his day when he came over. But inside, I was falling apart. One evening, I found myself in the bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid while the shower steamed the room. I pressed my fists to my forehead and sobbed so hard my ribs ached. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up planning, budgeting, telling myself I was building something solid for her. And in one decision, one stupid act of misplaced trust, I had leveled it all. How could you be so stupid? The words pounded in my skull. You knew who he was. You've always known. I wanted to curl up, to give up, to let the shame eat me whole. But then the door creaked open, and there they were, my daughter and Ethan, standing in the mist like two ghosts. Mommy? She asked softly, her little face crumpled with worry. Ethan stood beside her, silent, eyes wide. His shoulders were tense, like he expected to be yelled at just for existing. That image seared into me. These children, both of them, were looking at me, waiting to see who I would be now. Would I crumble like Jason? Would I let my mistakes define me? Something inside me snapped. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, forced a shaky breath, and pulled them close. I'm okay, I whispered, though my voice cracked. We're gonna be okay. I promise. The promise was reckless, maybe even a lie in that moment. I had no idea how to fix what had been broken. But saying it out loud planted a seed. That night, when they were finally asleep, I sat at the kitchen table in the dim light and stared at the empty ledger of my life. My savings, gone. My faith in family, obliterated. My self-respect, shaken to its core. But dignity? That was still mine. Jason hadn't stolen that yet. And I decided he never would. I grabbed a notebook and started writing, not budgets or lists this time, but anger. Every memory of his manipulation, every dollar I'd covered for him in the past, every time he'd laughed while I carried the weight. Page after page, the words poured out. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. It felt like bleeding poison. By the time dawn broke, my eyes were raw but my chest felt lighter. I hadn't solved anything, but I had shifted something. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was preparing. The breaking point wasn't the night I lost my money. It was the night I realized 2 children were watching me closely, needing proof that someone in their lives could stand firm. So I made a vow, written in shaky pen across the last page of that notebook. He may have stolen my stash. But he will not steal my dignity. He will not teach these kids that cruelty wins. Not while I'm still breathing. I didn't know yet what form that fight would take, lawyers, investigators, confrontation, but for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a spark. It was small, fragile, but it was alive. And as I closed the notebook, I realized anger had finally replaced shame. The fire was lit, and I was done being the quiet one who carried everything alone. Grief had worn me thin, but anger stitched me back together. Once I wrote those words in my notebook, "He won't steal my dignity," I felt something in me harden. I had spent too many nights curled up on the bathroom floor, too many mornings plastering on a smile for the kids while I felt like I was drowning. Jason might have taken the stash, but he wasn't going to take me down with it. The next morning, I brewed coffee like it was a battle ritual and opened my laptop. No more pacing. No more waiting. It was time to fight. I started small. I combed through my texts with Jason, screenshots of every promise he'd made. Safe as houses. Guaranteed return. I'd never let you down, M. Each line made my stomach twist, but each one was also ammunition. I downloaded bank statements, highlighting the transfers. I gathered notes I'd scribbled during our talks, even receipts of the nights I'd bought takeout after meetings with him because I was too drained to cook. At first, it felt pointless. What good were screenshots against a man who had already vanished? But piece by piece, a case began to form. This wasn't just a family squabble, it was fraud. He had lied, manipulated, and coerced me into handing over nearly everything I had. I called a lawyer. My hands shook as I dialed, expecting to be brushed off the way the police had. But the woman who answered, sharp voice, calm tone, listened as I spilled my story. When I finished, there was a pause. Do you have proof he promised an investment? Yes, I whispered, scrolling through the screenshots. Then you have more than you think. It's not hopeless. It's work, but it's not hopeless. Those words were oxygen. I hung up feeling steadier than I had in weeks. I could do this. I would do this. The next step was harder, involving other people. I called creditors, investigators, anyone who might shed light on Jason's movements. Some doors slammed shut. Others cracked open. I learned he had bounced checks, owed money all over town, left a trail of half-truths and burned bridges. Each discovery was like a spark to the fire in my chest. But the most powerful piece of evidence came unexpectedly, from Ethan. One night, while the kids colored at the kitchen table, he quietly slid me a folded paper. Dad left this, he mumbled. It was a crumpled casino voucher, the kind you cash in at the desk. My stomach dropped as I read the amount, thousands, lost in one night. The proof I'd feared but also needed, my stash hadn't vanished into thin air. It had been fed to slot machines and poker tables. I wanted to scream, to tear the paper in two. But instead, I smoothed it out and tucked it carefully into my growing folder of evidence. Ethan watched me with wide, nervous eyes. You did the right thing, I told him softly. Don't ever think otherwise. He nodded, though his shoulders stayed tight. That boy carried a weight no child should. And I knew, in that moment, that my fight wasn't only for myself, it was for him, too. With each step, my fear shrank. I wasn't just the fixer anymore. I wasn't the family wallet, the quiet backbone no one noticed until they needed something. I was becoming something else, something harder, sharper. An avenger. I started talking differently, too. When my mother called, fishing for news about Jason, I didn't hide my rage. He stole from me, I said flatly. If you want to defend him, do it somewhere else. The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. For once, I wasn't cushioning anyone. At night, after the kids went to sleep, I spread papers across the table like a war map. Bank logs, screenshots, Ethan's voucher. My notebook filling with dates, names, numbers. It felt almost holy, turning the chaos Jason left behind into order, into a weapon I could use. There were setbacks. Some people told me to let it go, that chasing him would cost more than I'd ever get back. It's family, one investigator said with a shrug. Sometimes you just cut your losses. But I couldn't. Not anymore. It wasn't about the money now. It was about the years of being dismissed, overlooked, stepped on. It was about Ethan's haunted eyes. It was about teaching my daughter that when someone tries to erase you, you don't stay erased. Every no I heard just made me more determined. By the end of that month, I had a binder thick with evidence and a resolve so sharp it scared even me. I wasn't the woman sobbing in the bathroom anymore. I wasn't the fool who believed in Jason's promises. I was the storm coming for him. And soon, he would see me not as the sister he could manipulate, but as the reckoning he never saw coming. The day I decided to confront Jason, I woke with a knot in my stomach so tight I thought I might throw up. For weeks, I had been preparing for this moment, collecting texts, vouchers, bank logs, every scrap of proof I could find. I'd stared at those papers night after night until the ink blurred, until my fury hardened into something sharper than fear. But all that evidence meant nothing if I never faced him. I sat at the kitchen table long after the kids had eaten breakfast, binder at my side, my coffee cold. My daughter hummed as she colored, Ethan silently stacking blocks beside her, his shoulders hunched like a boy who had learned to make himself small. Looking at them, I felt the fire in my chest roar to life again. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I let Jason keep spinning his lies, Ethan would drown in them too. So I made my choice. The drive across town felt endless. Every red light gave me a chance to turn back, every mile a chance to chicken out. But I gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened, forcing myself to keep going. I pictured Jason's smirk, his easy lies, the way he'd pocketed his phone that night like he'd just won a prize instead of gutted me. My anger carried me forward. The duplex sagged with neglect, its siding flaking, weeds pushing through cracks in the walkway. A broken porch light dangled like a loose tooth. It wasn't surprising. Jason always left things to rot behind him. When he opened the door, his expression faltered for a split second before he plastered on that smarmy grin. He drawled, leaning against the frame. Didn't expect you. I didn't wait for an invitation. I pushed past him, binder in hand, the kids trailing close. The smell hit me first, stale beer, cigarette smoke, fried food left too long in the trash. His furniture was mismatched, battered, half of it probably borrowed or stolen. It was the den of a man who lived like a squatter in his own life. Jason followed, trying to play it casual. So, what's this about? You come for an update? Things are. The sound of the binder hitting his table cut him off. It cracked against the wood like a gavel. What's this about, I said coldly, is that you stole from me. From them. I jerked my chin toward the kids. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes flickered. Stole? Come on, Em. Don't be dramatic. It was an investment. An investment? I snapped, flipping open the binder and pulling out the voucher Ethan had given me. I slapped it down in front of him. This is where it went. Thousands blown at a casino. Chips and cards. Your son told me everything. His mask cracked. For the first time, I saw fear creep across his face. His eyes darted to Ethan, who shrank back. You little. Don't you dare, I snarled, stepping between them. Don't you dare blame him for your mess. He's a child. You did this. Jason threw up his hands, feigning calm. Look, I had a plan. You don't get it. You've always been too cautious, too boring. Playing it safe doesn't cut it anymore. Sometimes you gotta take risks. Risks? I leaned in, close enough to smell the alcohol on his breath. You didn't risk your own money. You risked mine. My daughter's roof. Her meals. Her future. That wasn't your gamble to make. His bravado cracked further, replaced with raw anger. You think you're better than me? With your pathetic little job, your pathetic little savings account? You've always thought you were smarter, holier than thou. But you're nothing, Em. Just a broke single mom desperate enough to hand me the only thing she had. Once, those words would have gutted me. I would have stood there, cheeks burning, swallowing the shame he flung at me. But not now. I straightened, met his glare head-on, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. No, Jason. I'm not desperate. I'm done. Done covering for you. Done letting you drain me. You didn't expose me, you exposed yourself. And everyone is about to see you for what you are. I began flipping through the binder, page after page. The transfer records. The screenshots of his promises. The casino voucher. Each sound of paper hitting the table was another nail in the coffin of his lies. You're finished, I told him. Legally, socially, financially, done. You can rage and lie all you want, but you've left a trail a mile wide. Your debts are circling. The truth is circling. And this time, you're not dragging me down with you. His face twisted, a sneer pulling at his mouth. Who's gonna believe you? Huh? You think anyone cares? It's family. Family doesn't air dirty laundry. They'll take my side. I turned toward Ethan. My voice softened. He will. Jason froze. His son's gaze met mine, hesitant but steady. For the first time, I saw courage flicker there, flicker, then catch. Dad, Ethan said, his voice trembling, she's right. The words landed like a hammer. Jason spun, fury boiling over. Shut your mouth. But before Ethan could shrink, I stepped in front of him. My voice cut like steel. No. Not anymore. You've bullied him into silence long enough. That ends here. Jason's fists clenched, his whole body trembling with rage. For a moment, I thought he might swing. But then he saw it, the fire in my eyes. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not his shouting, not his gaslighting, not his pathetic threats. Something shifted in that silence. He knew it, and so did I. I gathered the binder, tucked it under my arm, and motioned for the kids. At the door, I turned back. This was the last time, I said quietly. The last time you take from me. The last time you scare him. You're not in control anymore, Jason. I am. His mouth opened like he wanted to fire back, but nothing came out. His face twisted, rage, fear, disbelief all tangled together. I stepped into the daylight, the kids close at my sides. The air outside was cool, sharp, almost cleansing. Ethan slipped his small hand into mine. My daughter looked up at me, eyes wide with something I hadn't seen before, awe. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. Inside that sagging duplex, Jason's rage simmered, but I knew it was hollow now. The reckoning was coming, and this time, it wouldn't be mine to carry. I thought the confrontation would be the climax. That walking out of Jason's duplex with Ethan's small hand in mine would be the end of the nightmare. But what came after, what came crashing down on him in the weeks that followed, was louder, uglier, and far more satisfying. It started with whispers. People who once laughed at his jokes, who bought into his charm, began asking questions. His landlord muttered to neighbors about unpaid rent. The buddy he'd borrowed money from blasted him on Facebook. A woman at the grocery store, one of his contacts for the so-called business, cornered me in the parking lot to demand answers. I didn't hold back. For the first time in my life, I laid the truth bare. He took my savings, I told her flatly. He gambled it away. There was never a business. Her face blanched, then hardened. Figures. He owes me $2,000. The ripple spread fast. Each person he'd used over the years began piecing their stories together. What once looked like a series of small mistakes suddenly revealed itself as a pattern, a man who lived off others until they broke. Then the creditors came knocking. Jason had stacked debt like poker chips, maxing out cards, taking out payday loans, skipping car payments. Now collectors were circling, and with every knock at his door, his temper frayed further. I knew because Ethan told me in hushed whispers. He yells a lot, he said one night at my table, staring at his untouched dinner. Sometimes he throws things. Each word fueled me to push harder. I sent the binder, every page of evidence, to our lawyer. She didn't promise miracles, but she promised Jason wouldn't walk away untouched. Civil suits were filed. His name appeared in public records tied to fraud and default. Suddenly, the man who had once strutted through town like he was untouchable couldn't get a landlord to rent him a room. But the real blow came from inside the family. My mother called one afternoon, her voice sharp with accusation. What are you doing to your brother? He says you're trying to ruin him. For the first time, I didn't shrink. I'm not ruining him, I said. He ruined himself. I'm just refusing to cover it up. She sputtered, tried to guilt me, but I cut her off. He stole from me. He scared Ethan. If you defend him, you're defending a liar and a thief. Choose carefully. The silence that followed was heavy. When she finally hung up, I knew a shift had begun. For years, I had been the silent supporter, the good one who absorbed everything. Now, I was the whistleblower. The one telling the ugly truth nobody wanted to hear. And the truth was spreading. At family gatherings, whispers replaced Jason's name. Aunts who once bragged about him now pursed their lips. Cousins stopped answering his calls. One by one, the people he had leaned on for years stepped back, unwilling to be his next victim. The social circle that once propped him up collapsed beneath him. Without an audience, Jason's bravado crumbled. He lashed out, angry texts, voicemails filled with venom. You think you're better than me? You're nothing without me. You'll regret this. I saved them all. Each word was proof. And though they stung, they no longer broke me. Each insult felt weaker, more desperate, like the tantrum of a child whose toys had been taken away. The final straw came when Ethan testified. Not in a courtroom, at least not yet, but in front of family. At a strange Sunday dinner my mother insisted on hosting, Jason tried to spin his lies again, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Ethan, voice trembling but clear, said, "It's not. He gambled it." I saw. The room fell silent. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. Jason went red, sputtering with rage. But it was too late. His son had spoken. The words no one could ignore were out in the open. That night, Jason stormed out, slamming the door so hard the house rattled. He left behind a family that no longer believed him, debts he couldn't outrun, and a son who had chosen truth over fear. I drove home with the kids asleep in the back seat, streetlights flashing across their faces. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe deeply. The fallout had been ugly, but it was no longer mine to carry. Jason's world was collapsing, and I wasn't buried beneath it. But the relief was complicated. Watching Ethan's small frame curled against the car window, I knew this was only the beginning for him. He had broken his silence, but the scars of living under his father's shadow would not vanish overnight. Still, a crack had formed. Light was getting through. Jason was unraveling, his lies exposed, his control slipping. But the real turning point wasn't his downfall, it was Ethan's whispered apology, the moment he finally admitted he wanted out. That was the crack in the wall I had been waiting for. The house was quiet the night Ethan broke. Too quiet. My daughter had already fallen asleep, curled against her stuffed rabbit, but Ethan lay awake on the couch, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. I'd left a blanket over him, but he hadn't moved in hours. I sat at the table nearby, going through job applications, the soft tick of the wall clock filling the silence. Something in me knew he wasn't really resting. His stillness wasn't peace, it was the kind of quiet that comes from holding too much inside. When I finally whispered, "You okay, buddy?" he turned his head toward me. His eyes glistened in the dim light, and before I could even get up, the words tumbled out. "I'm sorry." The apology hit me like a punch. Sorry? For what? He sat up, clutching the blanket in both fists. I should have told you sooner. About the money. About Dad. I didn't want you to give it to him. I knew he'd lose it. I knew. His voice cracked, a sob breaking free. I was scared. I rushed over, kneeling beside the couch. Ethan, no. None of this is your fault. You hear me? None of it. You're a kid. It was never your job to protect me. But he shook his head violently, tears streaming down his cheeks. He told me not to tell. Said if I did, bad things would happen. I thought, he broke off, gasping for air between sobs. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, it would get better. But it never did. It just got worse. My chest ached as I pulled him close, his small body trembling against me. This boy had carried secrets far heavier than any child should. And I had seen it in his eyes all along, the way he flinched at raised voices, the way he shrank when Jason's name came up. He had been living in fear, alone, until that moment. You are so brave, I whispered into his hair. Do you understand that? It takes courage to say the truth out loud. I'm proud of you, Ethan. More than I can ever say. He clung to me like he was drowning, his tears soaking my shirt. Between sobs, he whispered the words that changed everything. I don't want to live with him anymore. Please don't make me go back. Time froze. I pulled back, searching his face. He was dead serious. His eyes, red and swollen, were full of desperation but also something else, hope. Ethan, I said carefully, do you really mean that? You want to stay here? He nodded, biting his lip. You're safe. He's not. I don't care if we're poor. I don't care if it's hard. I just don't want to go back. My throat tightened so much I could barely breathe. This was bigger than money, bigger than revenge. This was a child asking me to rescue him, to rewrite his story. I hugged him again, tighter than before. Then you won't go back. I promise. The words slipped out before I could even think about custody laws or paperwork or the storm my family would unleash. None of that mattered in that moment. All that mattered was the boy in my arms who finally trusted me enough to speak. He relaxed against me, his sobs fading into hiccups. After a while, he drifted off to sleep, his small hands still clutching mine. I sat there long after, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. Because in his broken voice, I had heard the crack in the wall. For years, Jason had built his fortress out of lies, rage, and fear. He had convinced the world, and his own son, that he was untouchable. But that fortress wasn't solid. It was brittle. And Ethan, with his trembling confession, had knocked the first stone loose. The rest would come crashing down. The next morning, Ethan was quiet but lighter somehow. He ate breakfast with my daughter, even managed a small smile when she teased him about spilling milk. Watching them, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. Maybe we weren't just surviving this nightmare. Maybe we were building something new. Of course, the fight wasn't over. Jason would rage when he realized Ethan had chosen me. My mother would hurl guilt like daggers. The legal battles would be messy. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because Ethan wasn't alone anymore. And neither was I. As I packed lunches and tied shoelaces that morning, I caught Ethan watching me, his eyes steadier than I'd ever seen. He didn't say a word, but I understood. He was choosing me. And with that choice, the future I thought Jason had destroyed was beginning to take shape again. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the night Ethan whispered he didn't want to live with his father anymore. Half a year of chaos, paperwork, court dates, and long nights where I thought I might crumble under the weight of it all. But also half a year of something I hadn't felt in years, forward motion. The road wasn't smooth. Jason didn't go quietly. He stormed through phone calls and court hearings, spewing venom like a cornered animal. At first he denied everything, then tried to paint himself as the victim. She's poisoning my son against me, he shouted in one hearing, face flushed red. But the evidence spoke louder, the texts, the transfers, the casino voucher, and, most powerful of all, Ethan's own voice. The judge didn't mince words. Mr. Collins, your behavior demonstrates negligence and endangerment. Until further notice, custody is awarded to Ms. Harper. I almost collapsed right there in the courtroom. Ethan clutched my hand so tightly I thought he'd cut off my circulation. His eyes shone, not with fear this time, but with relief. That night, when we came home, my daughter and Ethan ran through the living room laughing. They had declared it a freedom party, complete with ice cream for dinner and staying up past bedtime. Watching them dance around in their pajamas, I felt something in me loosen that had been clenched tight for years. We were safe. The months that followed weren't glamorous, but they were ours. I landed a new job, better pay, better hours, something that didn't drain the marrow from my bones. It wasn't easy juggling everything, but it felt different now. Every paycheck wasn't just survival, it was proof that we were building again. Slowly, carefully, but with purpose. The house changed too. Ethan's presence filled spaces I hadn't realized were empty. His shoes by the door, his drawings taped to the fridge, the way he and my daughter whispered secrets long after bedtime. At first, he was hesitant, almost apologetic, as though afraid he didn't deserve the safety he'd found. But little by little, he blossomed. He laughed louder. He argued about cartoons. He asked for seconds at dinner without flinching. One night, I found him asleep at the table, math homework spread out in front of him, pencil still in hand. My chest ached, not with grief, but with pride. This boy who once trembled in silence was finding his voice, one small step at a time. And me? I was finding mine too. For so long, I had defined myself as the fixer, the dependable one, the invisible backbone. I thought that was strength, absorbing damage quietly, always giving, never asking. But now I knew better. Real strength was saying no. It was refusing to be erased. It was standing in the middle of a storm and deciding not to bend anymore. Jason's shadow still lingered. He called sometimes, his voice dripping with bitterness, each message angrier than the last. But they didn't pierce me anymore. I saved them all, not out of fear, but as reminders. Proof of who he really was. Proof of why I'd fought so hard. The rest of the family? They scattered into predictable camps. Some still made excuses for him, muttering that blood is blood. Others, tired of his lies, stopped returning his calls. But their opinions no longer held me hostage. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. What mattered was here, under my roof. 2 kids laughing in the kitchen. Homework spread across the table. Shoes kicked off by the couch. The messy, imperfect, beautiful evidence of a life rebuilt. One evening, as I tucked them both into bed, my daughter asked sleepily, "Mom, is Ethan my brother now?" I smiled, smoothing her hair. "If that's what you want him to be." Ethan, half asleep beside her, mumbled, "I want that." Tears stung my eyes. "Then yes. He's your brother." They drifted off holding hands, and I stood in the doorway, heart so full it hurt. That night, I wrote the final entry in my notebook, the same one where I had once scrawled, "He may have stolen my stash, but he won't steal my dignity." This time, I wrote, "The true revenge isn't what I took from Jason. It's what I built in spite of him. He tried to destroy my future, but I gave these kids a new one. Stronger. Brighter. Ours." I closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf, not as a weight but as a reminder. We weren't surviving anymore. We were thriving. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the fixer or the backbone. I felt like something more. A mother. A protector. A woman who refused to break. He may have gambled away my savings, but he'll never touch what I've built now, a family forged in fire, stronger than anything he could ever destroy. Has a child's simple truth ever shattered the illusions adults tried so hard to protect? Share it below. I want to hear your experiences. And if this story of betrayal, loss, and hard-won healing resonates, please like and subscribe. Thank you for being part of my journey. Remember, even the deepest wounds can teach us how to rise stronger, if we dare to face them.